Order. All right, so we're continuing today with our Vedic Christianity studies, which really is just looking at Christian teachings through a Vedic lens or Vedantic lens, which really the only thing we're doing is removing exclusivity more than anything, but just kind of showing how the principles of all of the what the world has created, these different traditions that the principles and what is being accomplished in each of those traditions is the same. And so instead of interpreting the world's religions as separate puddles, we're looking at religion as a flow where each of these visitations of these different Christs or these different incarnations that God is creating a deeper and wider river. He's not creating a series of exclusive puddles. And if you're a mystic, if you go deep into any of the traditions as a practitioner, not if you go as an academic, you'll see only difference. But if you go in as a practitioner who looks at why are these tools being used, what are these tools accomplishing, you will see that even though our tools may be different and our methods may be different, what they are trying to accomplish is where you find the unity. Right? It's like all religions are trying to remove the ego of the individual because the removal of that ego allows you to see the truth of oneness in people and in the world around you. And so we're looking at this book, The Cloud of Unknowing, written, I think around the 1500s, I think we determined from the beginning. I don't remember that necessarily either. But it was written by an anonymous monk, and it basically outlines, quite surprisingly to me anyway, the practices of mantra yoga, the practice of using the name of God, repeating the name of God continuously in order to bring about your enlightenment. And so this covers all of the tenets of what he calls the exercise, which is the practice of mantra meditation. And we're on chapter XLI. I don't know what an L is. So let's see. Before we got to the L's, we were at 39. So it must be 40. And now we're on chapter 41. So somehow the L means 40 in there. All right. Chapter 41. Discretion applies to all other exercises except this. Okay, this will be interesting. Discretion usually means discernment, or discretion can also mean secrecy or privacy. So let's see what he's talking about. Let's see what he's going to say. If you ask me the further question, how you are to apply discretion to this exercise, I answer and say none at all. Now he's got a footnote here. It says Cassian's one of the early church fathers. Cassian stresses that Antony the Hermit and all other spiritual fathers maintain that discretion leads to God and is the guardian of all virtues. It is the essential condition for reaching the highest point of perfection. For the Dionysians, who teach that reaching out to God is the exercise of perfect love, it follows that it is the purpose of discretion and is thus not governed by it. The teaching is elaborated in the later discernment of impulses. Right, and I think they're using the word discretion as the ability to discern, to judge. And he's saying it doesn't have a place in this practice. Let's see why he says. I answer and say none at all. In all your other activities, you are to have discretion in eating and drinking and sleeping and in protecting your body from the extremes of hot and cold, in the length of time you give to prayer or reading or conversation with your fellow Christians. In all these things, you are to observe moderation, avoid excess and defect. But in this exercise, there is no question of moderation. I would prefer that you should never leave off as long as you live. Right? So he's saying that there's in your repeating of the mantra, repeating of the name, or repeating of your seed word that if you chose your own from his instructions earlier on, that just like what Holy Mother says, the mantra should never stop in your mind. The name of God should always be running in the back of your mind, right? Because the name invokes the form, invokes the presence. And so by repeating the name, that is one of the methods. We've used many different methods and many that we make up on our own for remembering God and being mindful of our divine nature as Satchitananda, love, wisdom, and being, that we come up with methods for remembering that all the time, because remembering that combs the soul, takes the knots out of the soul, takes the knots out of our intellect, because it reminds us who we are. And once we know who we know how to live. We are love itself. We are wisdom itself. We are existence itself. And so as long as we do anything in accordance with unconditioned love, we will find satisfaction. We will find contentment in it, because that's our nature. Anything that we use wisdom for, to produce or do or work, we will find satisfaction, because that's in our nature. Anything that we do while we're present, not distracted by the future, not lost in the past, but present in the moment, anything that we do with that kind of awareness is going to be lead us to contentment, lead us to fulfillment, right? Because we're acting in accordance with our divine nature, that image of God, if you will, that's been placed within us. That image of God is Satchitananda, the qualities of intellect, intelligence, the qualities of love or bliss, the qualities of existence, being, right? So on this exercise, when you do your japam, when you're repeating the names of God, the name of God, there you cannot do it too much, right? There's no such thing as overdosing on the divine name. The more that you do it, the more the blessing will be found within yourself. And the more of your sincerity and earnestness that you add to it, if you can add those two spices, the degree to which you add those two spices determine how long it's going to take you, right? So if you're sincere and earnest in it, and you're repeating the name and you're doing it with that kind of attention, love will grow in you. And you will begin to palpably feel and recognize, really is what it is. You begin to recognize the presence of God within yourself as you do more, as you do more of the practices to learn and discern what are you and who are you and how are you put together. And when you come to know and discover within yourself that shrine of the heart where the self resides in contentment all the time, then we can withdraw from the busy mind and stop identifying ourselves with it and all that it tells us about ourselves, because it can only tell you things about yourself that can fit into words, that can fit into time-space causation. And so our soul, our self, does not fit into time-space causation, which is why it cannot be described, it cannot be spoken about. And that's why the methods for us finding out who we are always lead us to silence, because we're trying to quiet the mind so that we can hear reality, right? We do not need to be told who we are, because we are it. But we need a chance to be without being told what we are. And so we must silence the mind, and we must cancel out our habits and our narratives that we have running within us, that get triggered constantly throughout our day without us even being aware of their movings and their workings. So this is why we practice like this, because it builds awareness, it builds focus, it builds presence. And those are all necessary for breaking out of our shells of false narratives and false values and false enjoyments that ultimately hurt us more than they give us enjoyment, right? And so this is why he would say there's no limit to how much of this practice you want to do. Do as much as you can, and the ideal is always to be constantly in the back of your mind, keeping the presence of God in your sight. He says, I do not say that you should persevere in it with the same vigor, for that is not possible, right? So you don't have to do it at an intensity. Like Ramakrishna says, the singer can't keep his voice at T or do all the time. Sometimes you have to come back down, we can't hold that high note consistently. And so in spiritual life also, our practice doesn't have to be at that zealous 20-year-old intelligence or intensity of truth and knowing. I know everything, right? It's done as like water running over granite. That's how your practice is. It's imperceptible what it's doing. You can't see that ultimately that piece of granite is going to be chopped into two pieces by that water running over it, right? So it's that we're talking about geologic time when we're talking about self-realization, right? It can take long times, but because it's a matter of grace, always a matter of grace, it's never a matter of works, right? But the works make you aware of grace, and that awareness of grace builds your love for God within, builds your inspiration for going farther and for finding strength. And then ultimately it becomes your inspiration for following your path and releasing your divine nature, right? So it all works together, but it all has to be done in sincerity and earnestness with love, right? With a fond regard for the practice within ourselves. And it's gentle. It's not lazy, but it's gentle, so that we are always trying to maintain a level of respect and friendship with the mind, right? We're not trying to repress. We're not trying to push around or to, hammer on. It's all done in love and all done with the patience, right? In this practice, the way you treat yourself is to understand that your thoughts are ultimately heard by God, even before they're heard by you, right? And so we live with that awareness. And so the way that I speak to myself, you see, my ego thinks that my mind talks to it, right? What my ego doesn't understand is that standing right behind it in clarity is the divine presence, and that my mind is always actually addressing the divine presence within me. And the ego steals that and creates a separate, temporary, small being that gets to be named Swami C. Right, and that Swami C is non-existent in reality. He's just a set of confusions. If that's not clear to everybody, he's just a set of confusions, right? And ultimately, when we get that mopped up, what remains is the divine presence, the divine a love with no conditions, a wisdom with no boundary, and a presence that is eternal and infinite. Right. So sometimes sickness or other disorders of the body or of the soul and many other necessities of nature will greatly hinder you in your practice and often pull you down from the height of this exercise. But I say that you should always be either doing it or preparing for it. That is to say, either actually or in intention. For the love of God, beware of sickness as much as it is possible for you. Insofar as you can, never be the cause of your physical weakness. For it is true that I say, this work demands a great tranquility and a clean bill of health, as well in body as in soul. So, for the love of God, govern yourself wisely in body and in soul, and keep in good health as much as possible. But if sickness comes to attack your bodily strength, have patience and wait in humility for God's mercy. Everything shall then be well enough. Right? I love it when we're reminded of this. All of your success can only be measured by your understanding of grace, not by your changes in behaviors, not by new memorizations, not for new flights of philosophy and poetry, right? The only measure of spiritual life is twofold. Are you loving and are you unselfish? Swami Vivekananda says those are the only two measures of spiritual life. And in the end, that is how you will be known, right? Jesus also says, they will know your disciples that you're my disciples by your love, right? Not because you can recite verses, not because you hate the right people or love the right people. It's because you are loving. That's how people know you as a disciple, as a spiritual seeker, right? Everything shall then be well enough. What I say is true, that often patience in sickness and in various other tribulations pleases God much more than any satisfying devotion that you might have whilst you're in good health, right? So he's really just saying when you're sick, Don't give up your practice entirely, right? Try and keep a marker for it. Like I was told way back in the 90s when I first started my meditation practice. Well, I'm still starting my meditation practice. But back then, when I was starting of my meditation practice, my teacher told me that you should set a time twice a day for your practice. You should pick an amount of time that you know that you can do every day, and you should never miss it for any circumstance whatsoever. And if for some reason you can't do it that day, still get down on a knee somewhere quiet and acknowledge to God that you can't do it at that moment. Still hold the marker in your mind, right? Because you know that every morning when you wake up at 6 a.m., that's when you do your practice. If you do it every day at 6 a.m., everybody knows your body will automatically wake up at 6 o'clock. And if it knows that that's now meditation time, the mind will automatically prepare itself to go into meditation time. And so you pick a room or a chair or a place in your home that you use for nothing else but your spiritual practice. And when you sit in that chair or in that room or in that space, the mind will pick that up and see, spiritual practice, time to calm down, time to be quiet, right? And then you add to that the smell of the incense that you always light. Now we're starting. The mind gets that signal, smell of incense, holiness. And you might ring a bell, bing, right? And the mind is further, whose dog is it? That Pavlov's dog or something. So the mind will get all of these signals and will slowly fall into its habit of quieting down for the practice. Because you've been steady and because you've been reliable, the mind now is reliable as well, right? And so that's how we form that practice, and that's how we do it. And so when you get sick, if you can, just at least go into the shrine. If you can't go into the shrine, at least lift up your handkerchief and wave it at the Lord and say, I am so sick, beloved. Instead, I'm just going to sit here and listen to a beautiful devotional song about you. Or sing one, or hum one, right? Like that. All right, chapter 42. These are really just paragraphs more than chapters. Chapter 42. Through lack of discretion in this exercise, we achieve discretion in all things, and certainly in no other way. All right, this is interesting. Now, perhaps you will ask how you shall observe prudence in eating and sleeping and everything else. My answer to this is brief enough. Understand it as best you can. Work at this exercise without ceasing and without moderation, and you will know where to begin and to end all other activities with great discretion. I cannot believe that a soul who perseveres in this exercise day and night without moderation should ever make a mistake in any of his external activities. But otherwise, it seems to me that he can never be free of error. So what he's saying here is do this practice all the time, and this practice alone will set everything else right within you. And you say, well, how can that be? Just sitting there chanting the name of God. Well, what is the name of God? It's the name of God, right? It invokes the presence of God. Well, who is God, right? Well, that you, which is before mind, before egoism, that you, which is before body, is God. And so by chanting the name and presence, by invoking the presence, by invoking that awareness within, that is how we learn what God is in a finite sense, right? In a devotional sense. Because of course God has no handles in his absolute sense. There's no way to know the infinite, unchanging absolute, because it's beyond attribute, it's beyond measurement, it's beyond boundary. So there's not a handle on it to grab God. That's why he chooses to incarnate. That's why he comes as a Buddha or a Rama or a Krishna. You could just imagine a big pitcher of life, and that the handle to that pitcher is a Jesus or Rama or Krishna, and it allows you to pick up the pitcher of life and pour yourself a glass of it, right? So this is that relationship in there. And so as you come to know who you are, that begins to express. And as you begin to reduce your ego is a contrary influence on your nature, right? It's trying to convince you that your nature is material, that you're a body, that you get hungry, that you have desires. It's trying to convince you that you're a mind. There's things that you want. There's accomplishments you need. There's tasks you should complete, right? All of these things, and a slew of narratives about your life. Are you living life properly? Are you being good enough? Are you being fun enough? Are you interesting enough? Are you educated enough? Right? Do people like you? Do people not like you? Are you a good leader, or are you just a follower? All these things that the mind and body are interested in form when the spirit touches it and imbues it with life and then identifies with it, it gets stuck. It actually thinks itself to be the body mind, right? And so when it has that belief, then it stops following its divine will, right? That doesn't seem apropos because it doesn't have anything to do with my body. It doesn't have anything to do with my mind, and that's who I am, right? But the constant reflection on God allows you to come to the knowledge, and it is a knowledge. It's not a hypnotization of like forcing something in there. What it does is it keeps you aware of God. And then as things quiet down inside, you begin to realize how God feels in a body, how presence feels in a mind, right? And what it is to be separate from both body and mind as a self, as an awareness, right? And to find that place, because that awareness rests or begins or emanates from the shrine of the heart. And in the shrine of the heart is where we try and find that place within us. It's the 0 point of stillness within you, where, as it were, God rushes into this manifest world through a little hole the size of your thumb. that None of that's important to know, but that this is where the manifesting happens. It comes in through the heart, right? And it flows into the rest of you. You try and find that place of stillness, of silence. And you sit in that place of stillness and you open yourself to an awareness of a pure love that exists there, a pure wisdom that exists there. And as you come to know this and come to experience, because you're discerning within and you're seeing things as they are and not as the mind is telling you, at that point you begin to discover beautiful things about yourself, right? That's where you find certain empowerments and certain insights that are very helpful to your process of purification, your process of removing me and mine from your identity, right? Because in our identity, if we are that, what is that? That is not a particular. That's why we use the word that, right? It's not a particular, it's a general. It's God's center is everywhere. Our center is one. It's just right here. But God's center is everywhere, right? And so he is not an individual. He's a general, which means that can't fall under the same limitations that we do as an identity. All right, chapter 37 here, or 47. If I could only concentrate with earnestness and a vigilance on this spiritual exercise within my soul, I would be completely heedless about eating, drinking, speaking, and other outward activities, for I am sure that I would rather arrive at discretion in them by this heedlessness than by an earnest consideration of them with the purpose of achieving a target or a degree of moderation in this respect. Indeed, I would never achieve it, no matter what I did or said. Other men may express different opinions, but experience is a true witness. So lift up your heart with this dark impulse of love. Mean now sin and now God. God you wish to have and sin you would avoid. You lack God, but you are sure to have sin. Now may the good God help you, for here you have need. Right, right. So this sin really is marked by egoism. You know, sin has a singular cause. And in Christianity, for some reason, they've called him the devil. In Vedanta, we call him the ego, right? The ego is the wall that has separated you from the whole. I'm not God. I'm not my neighbor. I'm not anybody else. I'm me. I'm separate and apart, and I am autonomous. I function on my own, right? And I'm a body mind, right? Believing yourself to be a body mind, all of the vices are generated from that idea, right? All the vices are generated from the idea of me being a body mind. And all ethics or all virtues are indicated by my knowing that I am one with everything. Right? So all things that lead to oneness are virtuous. All things that lead toward the multiplicity are vices, right? Vices. And so that's a good thing to know as you become established in that within. To do something you like means that you follow something that is good. Maybe not pleasant, but it's good. Right? And so as we grow in this awareness of presence within, we're inspired to right living, because that is how we find our fulfillment. That is how we maintain the sense of presence, which is that sense of love in our life. And we try and fill ourselves up with it so that it spills out. And the best way for love to spill out is accidentally, where you just are walking around Santa Barbara full of love, just spilling it on everyone, completely no intentions, no agendas, nothing. You just love because it's what you are. And so you walk around sloshing love. Oof, oof. You're not even meaning it. It's just everywhere in you. That's a divine soul. That's someone who has known, who knows the beloved, right? So lift up your heart with this dark impulse of love, right? And that's going to take us to chapter 43. All awareness and experience of one's own being must be done away with before the perfection of this exercise can be truly experienced in this life. Okay? So, all awareness and experience of one's own being. I think he's kind of hinting at that which has constructed the ego self. Right? All of that stuff, all of the narratives that you've collected about yourself that are not true. I'm a woman. I'm a man. I'm an American. I'm 60. I'm handsome. I'm ugly. I'm big. I'm small. All that. I'm rich. I'm poor. Whatever those are. All of those things are false narratives because they change, right? I can say that temporarily I'm a Santa Barbaran, but will I always be a Santa Barbaran? Oh, well, probably not. You know, I wasn't one last year. And so that can't be a true thing about my identity, right? A true thing, a lasting thing means it never changes. It's always reliable. And so Ramakrishna teaches us that which is changing is unreal. That which is unchanging alone is real. And that's one of the ways that we find the chamber of the heart. That's one of the ways that we find our true self within. You go looking for within yourself, and there's a riddle here. You go looking within yourself for that which does not change. Are you going to find it? Nope. Why? Because it's the one that's looking for it. So you find it through reverse osmosis, right? You go in there looking for something that doesn't change, and the thing that doesn't change is the observer within you, that which has always been you. You know, your body once was the size of a thumb, and that body and the body that's whatever size it is now, it's the same you. How do you know that? Because within you is the unchanging presence of the divine, which has stayed steadily the same as the body and mind have changed radically through your life. And so we're trying to use that principle to touch upon that image of God by understanding it is that which is unchanging alone within me, right? And that unchanging nature of it ultimately becomes the very foundation of your faith. It's what turns you into what the Bhagavad Gita describes as that man or person of steady wisdom, right? The person who's not all over the place based on moods, based on conditions, based on circumstances. They're just content and going forward, unbothered, unperturbed, right? Steady. And so it's because of God's unchanging nature and his unchanging and unconditioned love for you right? And his infinite grace that provides you the unchanging platform for becoming that, that spiritual principle that emanates pure love, divine love, to become that divine principle that emulates wisdom, right? And to lose the narratives that have distorted or prismed our free nature, our divine nature. All right, 43 maybe. Permit nothing to work in your understanding or in your will except God alone. Wow, there it is. First sentence. What we've stumbled upon and have been working toward for a while now is that when you sit down to meditate and you sit there repeating the name of God, you do not have to clean up anything. You do not have to fix your mind. You don't have to be the one that shuts it up. You don't have to be the one that becomes disciplined and all of those things, right? That's what Mother says. It's not the child's responsibility to change his diaper. It's the mother's responsibility. She says it's God's responsibility. It's yours to what? To be available, right? So that's what our practice is. It's sitting down, repeating our mantra in attention, placing ourselves in the light of awareness, the divine light of God's presence. And that light will ripen you into your maturity as an enlightened soul, right? So you just have to do what an apple does, what a pear does, what an orange does. You just hang out on the tree of God's presence. And that divine light in its time, in its own time, will ripen you. You can't make it happen any faster. You just sit there and be available. Patience is important. Patience is a great teacher, and you will learn much from it through the process. So when you sit, you don't have to worry about how noisy your mind is. You just sit there with the beloved and watch it, right? And you can talk to the beloved anytime you want about it. It's like, oh my gosh, did you see what it just did? Right? I remember one time, I've shared this before, one time I was sitting and doing that practice. I had placed my mind in my proverbial left hand because I was having a big struggle with lust that day. And so I put my mind in my hand and I sat there with Divine Mother. I had Divine Mother sitting over here somewhere on my shoulder, maybe on my, she was anyway over in this area. And so we were looking at my mind together. And I remember telling her, I said, Mother, you would be struggling just as bad as I am if this was your mind. And I just remember, I just felt like Mother looked at me like, what did you just say? You just said something very true and you don't know how true it is. Because I saw that day that it is she who is watching my mind. But when she is sitting and watching my mind, when she becomes identified with my mind, she becomes me. She takes my name. And we become an ego self, right? So she was showing me, you are me with an ego. You are me with a limitation, right? With a set of attributes that are only true in this place and time. Whereas I am always true, outside of place, outside of time, right? And so that's where we're trying to get. We're trying to get rid, to let go of these changing attributes that are always indicative of a time and place. We're trying to drop that limitation and to find our infinite, ever-present self that doesn't die, that doesn't grow old, that is always there as a divine principle. And so he's telling you here, when you sit, don't go to work and don't let anything else work. You speak the name and know that God's presence is fixing things as you chant the name within you. That is enough. Awareness will untie the knots of Maya. Okay, so you just sit there in patience, being in God's presence as fully as you possibly can, just chanting the name and trying to open to that meaning. What does it mean to say Jesus? What does it mean to say Buddha or Rama? It invokes a presence. Well, what is that presence? It is divine love, divine wisdom, and isness, awareness of the moment. So permit nothing to work in your understanding or in your will except God alone. Try to destroy all understanding and awareness of anything under God, and tread everything down deep under the cloud of forgetting. Right? So anything that changes is really what he's saying here. Anything that's what he means when he says anything under God. Right? Anything under God would be the creation. And the creation is the thing that changes. Creations have beginnings, middles, and ends. So anything that is changing, don't let that come into your awareness. You want to forget all of that. So you just kind of let it keep coming, and you just don't be interested in any of it. If it changes, it's unreal, so don't be interested in it. Keep your mind chanting the name, which is permanent, which is unchanging as you go forward, right? Understand that in this exercise, you are to forget all other creatures beside yourself, or their deeds, or yours. And in this exercise, you must also forget yourself and your own activities, as well as all other creatures and their activities, because of God. For the perfect lover's way is not only to love the thing that he loves more than himself, he must also, in a sense, hate himself for the sake of the thing that he loves. Right? And so we're going to, instead of using this word hate, we're going to use the word renounce. All right? We're going to use the word renounce. And so you have to be willing to let go of the things that you cherish that change, because they are causes of your stunted growth. They are the reason you cannot see God in this moment. Right? So we have to reject the demands of the body, reject the demands of the mind. Right? And we still take care of them, right? But we don't do it on their terms. We're not spoiled, entitled selves running around, right? If my body wants filet mignon, well, it can sit there and want filet mignon happily while it drinks a glass of water. Right? And so that's what he's telling us here. Do not let your mind become attracted to and don't identify with thoughts of pleasant things that you're identified with while you're meditating. Stay separate, right? Let it all pass. Let it pass. The only way that it can influence you is if you identify with it. If you say, that's my thought, that's my desire, that's my idea, right? Then you're attaching and defining yourself, and then you start accruing karma for that wrong thinking. So you don't do that. You just sit there and watch neutrally. Let everything happen. Just watch, but watch carefully. Why did that thought happen now? Oh, you know what? That fly landed on my cheek, reminded me of that wound, which then pulled up the memory of that thing. And so you become intimately aware with the workings of your inner world. And that's how you find freedom, right? Because ultimately you begin to see all the little knots and tricks and slip knots and whatnot that you've constructed over the years to make your very comfy little nest of a prison. This then must be your attitude. Every object that exercises your understanding and your will, you must account as loathsome and wearisome except for God alone. Right? So basically renounce anything that okay, this gets tricky because we're in Maya doing a practice in Maya. So there's going to be some contradictions here, because ultimately we come to know that everything is God. And so if someone's telling you not to think of things that aren't God, that only makes sense at the level we're living at right now. Okay, so at the level that we're living at right now, it is a good idea to renounce things that change, so that your mind can pay attention to, be nurtured by, and establish itself in that which does not change. And once you've got that security, what's that going to do for you? Remember, it's the love of God that doesn't change. And so by contemplating those things which don't change within ourselves, we begin to approach God not on the value of what we do or behave or say or think. We begin to approach God because of his grace and because of his unconditioned love. And that is the only steady and reliable way that we can approach God. If we approach God because we think we're doing well, well, that's fine as long as we think we're doing well. What are you going to do when you're not doing well? right? If we approach God because for any reason, it's a temporary reason. The only reason that isn't temporary is the love of God and the mercy that God is always making available to us. And so we can always feel comfortable in the presence of God, regardless of our condition. The growing will happen as long as we keep remembering the presence, right? And keeps going. All right. So it is no wonder that you should loathe and hate to reflect on yourself, since you must always experience sin as some sort of foul, fetid lump between yourself and God, right? A foul, fetid lump. That's another name for ego. This lump is nothing else than yourself. Okay. Your problem at this moment is because you believe exactly that. Your problem at this moment, the reason that you're not God realized, is because you believe this fetid lump of nothing to be yourself, right? You think that's who you are. And because of that, the Christians define your nature as evil or as fallen or as wicked, because they're defining you in ego state. But Adam was not always in ego state. Before he agreed to eat that fruit with Eve, both of them were liberated. Both of them were in a state of divine realization, divine knowing. Right? But as soon as they became fallen, then you see you see how they acted so differently after they fell. Right? They were afraid of God. They were vulnerable. They felt themselves to be naked. All of these things were the result of no longer being the infinite I am, but now being a small body in a garden, right? And so we see the change that comes over them. They're afraid, they run away from God. And God now tells them, for all the days of your life, because you've chosen to live how? According to your senses, according to the dictates of the external world, according to the dictates of your mind. Now, all the days of your life, you're going to have to scratch and till at the dust of the earth to fulfill your desire, right? So this curse, you no longer can enjoy paradise, because now that you've joined yourself with the senses and the mind, they require work. They require money. They require clothing. They require all of these things. And if you were in divine state, you know that those things were not important. Adam and Eve didn't need clothing. They didn't need a supermarket. They were in a paradise of a garden where they could just walk around and eat whatever they wanted, except for one tree, right? So they were doing pretty good. And then they fell. And then they had to leave the garden. And now they had to garden. And now they had to work all the days of their lives. And so what are we doing? Exactly that. We go to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day for what? To pay for our vacations, to pay for our cars, our clothes, our flowers, our houses, our jobs, our kids, our wives, our husbands, right? And all of those demands mount and mount and mount, and one narrative after another comes alive, and soon you're just gasping for a little breath of God, just a little breath of freedom.
And if I may ask a question here.
Please.
So how do we look upon the body? Is body a vessel of God that where soul dwells, and we have to kind of upkeep it in purity and um, proper state so that it can kind of function as a vessel, God's vessel, or is it a foul and kind of a foul, well, how do they call it? Something foul that we have to really get rid of.
Yes, fetid
Like,
and foul.
yeah, right. Some people say, like, it's really something very, where some saints were ashamed of having physical body.
Yeah, we don't want to go there. We don't want any resistance, right? We want acceptance, but we want to know things as they are. I am spirit, right? Which means I have no boundaries. So I can't fit in a body and a mind. And so I have to know that this body carries me, as it were. I ride it like a chariot. And it is the vehicle that is going to bring me to realization, or potentially can bring me to realization. So I want to take care of it, right? I want to respect it.
Mhm.
I want to do the things that are best for it, but I do not obey it. I
So,
do
but
not
we
jump.
don't offend body like saying it's foul, yucky, I hate you. We
Well,
don't
that also
agree.
is a path, but I don't think it's. I'm going to be a little bit bold here. I think that's why. Okay, I'm not going to do it. Uh, Maybe after I turn the recorder off.
Please turn it off. I would like to hear what you really think.
All right, I'm going to pause the recorder. All right. So he says, thus must be your attitude, right? This loathing, we're not going to go down through the loathing of ego, but look at the ego with loathing, right? If you're looking at the ego with loathing, that's all right. Because the ego is formed by body mind, and it's actually ultimately the result of what it is to be body mind. And nobody likes an egotistical person. Nobody likes that. You can see why we don't want to be egos. And so we have this discomfort toward the ego self. But our self is Satchitananda. It is divine love. It is divine wisdom. It is divine presence. And that love, that self, we are all embracing, right? So our true nature, we love deeply. The false nature, we renounce, right? We discern, we see that it's not us, and we renounce it. And ultimately, once we find our true nature and we experience a self with no boundary and an unconditioned love, then at that point we see clearly that all things were our own, including that body and that mind and that ego, right? But on the way, we have to set them down. When we get to the goal, we know that it was not, it wasn't real, right? In that sense. This lump is nothing else than yourself, which is the problem, which is not true, and believing it to be true is the problem. The lump itself is not the problem, right? The lump comes from believing that you are it. It shall seem to you that it is one with, congealed with, and is a substance of your being, as though there were no division between them, right? So, yes, that's exactly right. The ego does not want you to see a division between it and you, right? It wants you to be fully in its embrace. So you must destroy all knowing and feeling of every kind of creature, anything that changes, right? But most especially of your ego self, that part of you that believes yourself to be separate and apart from God. That must be wiped out, right? For on the knowledge and experience of yourself depends the knowledge and experience of all other creatures, because thou art that, right? Everybody has created their own world in which they live. Compared with the self, all other creatures can easily be forgotten. If you are willing to make serious trial of this, you will find, after you have forgotten all other creatures and all their works, yes, indeed, and your own works as well, what remains between you and your God is a simple knowing and a feeling of your own being. That is that intense ecstasy of love that Ramakrishna experienced, many sages have experienced, um, because they're purified, they're pure. And so they see God in the moment. They see God as clearly as they see the furniture in that moment, right? So that's what remains when you renounce ego. What remains is the relationship between you and the beloved, a simple knowing and feeling of your own being. This knowing and feeling must always be destroyed before it is possible for you to experience in truth the perfection of this experience. So you even what he's saying there is something that I was talking about last week or the week before. This notion that uh, there I was talking with James the other day, actually, and I was enjoying bliss a great deal the other day in a meditation. It was a very nice time, very lots of warm love in there. And I realized that or I suspected for a moment that I was becoming a little bit of a spiritual materialist, which means I had a result that I was desiring for my practice. I wasn't doing my practice purely for its own sake, for the sake of just pure love. I was doing it because I was enjoying a feeling of love. And I thought to myself, don't even look at that feeling of love, right? Don't even look at it because that becomes a motive and that is not God. It's changing, right? I should only be thinking of that, what that love indicates, what warm feeling indicates. So I look through that feeling at the cause, which is love, which is God herself behind it. And I keep my eyes on God herself behind all of the experiences of my meditation. I never take my eyes off of God to look at the pleasure that I'm experiencing or to look at the wonderful feeling of love that's warming my heart. Or, you know, don't take your eyes off of God for any reason, is what he's saying in this. Certainly not to observe anything that is changing or to get wrapped up in anything that changes, right? He says, because you have to follow God all the way to the goal, right? You have to follow that scent of that divine perfume wherever it takes you. Follow that, right? Okay, let's stop there for the day.